Focusing solely on the data is not enough to ensure that there is fair or balanced use and implementation of these systems. So I go back to the need for responsible AI as an imperative, and it has to be this intentional, comprehensive approach to ensure that there is safe, secure, fair, and inclusive design, development, deployment, and ongoing use of AI and its underlying data. Transparency is an important dimension of responsible AI. We're seeing this evidenced by its inclusion in principle or strategy documents on responsible AI and trustworthy AI, and also in its emphasis from legislators focusing on mandating transparency as one of the guardrails for safe and fair use of AI. Last year, we at AWS released AWS AI service cards, which enhance transparency by providing customers with a form of responsible AI documentation with information in a single place that gives them context for the intended use cases and limitations, provides design choices, fairness considerations, best practices, or performance for a set of AI use cases. They're part of a comprehensive development process that we actually undertake to build our services responsibly with things like fairness, robustness, governance, privacy, and security, in addition to transparency and explainability in mind. Now, transparency and explainability should be something that is considered in the initial stages of your product development or design lifecycle. It has the potential to shape what algorithm or product that you might use, and it has to be considered in the context of the application or the use case. So, for example, with decisions that affect people's lives and livelihoods, loan applications, legal sentencing, college admissions, there may be a greater need for transparency, some of which might be mandated by law, which means that you probably would have to make a design choice for algorithms that will provide greater explainability, like linear regression or decision trees. Uh, One other thing I'll add is that there is a direct correlation between transparency and trust, right? And earning customer trust is critical to our business as well as, I believe, to many others. And that trust that an individual or consumer has in us is going to affect the trust that is gained in the industry as well as in the technology itself. So I think that this transparency is critical to the way in which we continue to build and have the ability to take advantage of this technology in ways that benefit society.
We cannot ensure transparency for AI, in one sense, until all users are able to access and have some semblance of control for their data. California, just a few days ago in the United States, has a new act where users, citizens, can delete data with regards to how data brokers access their data. So one thing is the end user must have the ability to have access and control over their data, or there is not real transparency in terms of the manifestation of what these systems do. Building transparency and explainability into these systems really has to do with the people creating the tech. At IEEE, we have a number of standards focus on this. One of them is called IEEE 7001. Really recommend you check that out.
Transparency is a desirable property where it can be obtained, but I sometimes think it's perhaps the most overrated ethical principle talked about in AI systems. There are some settings where transparency would actually be undesirable. I don't want Google's AI algorithms that rank search results to be any more transparent because more people would then be able to gain them. And there are other settings where I suspect transparency may be difficult or even impossible to obtain. Human vision is not very transparent. We don't understand really how it works. So I'm not sure that necessarily we're ever going to understand how computer vision works. But that doesn't mean that we can't build it into systems, high-stakes systems, because just like with human decision making, we can put those systems in institutions such that we can trust the outcome of those results.
Regardless of whether AI is being used for decision support or for decision making, it's incredibly important that we bake in AI transparency and explainability from the outset to help build trust with the users and organizations that are adopting AI. For a number of years now, there's approaches around feature stores and feature engineering that really are more or less a solved problem when it comes to the question of transparency and explainability, although that's typically constrained for non-black box-led approaches to AI development. But even in some of the more supposedly black box approaches, such as large language models, there are some interesting solutions that are emerging. For instance, parallelly running the primary model or pipeline that's conducting the inference alongside a secondary model responsible for transparency and explainability by focusing on the inputs and outputs of the primary models to drive its inferences can lead to some increased transparency in even the most black box approaches. So really what we need is a conscious decision to invest in building AI and using AI in a transparent and explainable manner, especially when it comes to sensitive use cases.
This is an ethical or philosophical question. It makes an underlying assumption that I'm not sure holds true, that AI has some moral capacity or consciousness that is believed to be oftentimes resigned to us human beings. So if machines mimic emotional qualities or compassion, does that mean that they emote or have empathy? Now, without debating the philosophical, I think that the question we want to ask is, why do we want machines to have ethics, empathy, or compassion? And we want that because we want to be able to eliminate or reduce the possibility of harmful effects or negative or unintended impact of these systems on human beings and on our society. Then if that's the question, then it's true that we can program or design machines to follow ethical guidelines and design, train, and implement and use them in ways that are going to be safe, secure, fair, and inclusive. This is the objective, I believe, of responsible AI. It's intended to accomplish providing an organizational structure, people-centered focus, governance, controls, best practices, tooling, right, to constrain the use, provide the cultural context that's necessary for systems to operate in a way that provide better assurance of the desired outcome.
One short answer is no. Machines are not sentient. Machines do not have the capability to inherently have emotions or consciousness, at least as of today. If one wants to believe that machines are or could be sentient, this is faith or informed speculation. As of today, attributing emotions to machines is what's called anthropomorphization. And in effective computing, this is something that can lead to manipulation, especially with the elderly or young people. Saying that machines inherently have ethics or emotions or empathy is not what we want to do. We want to focus on the humans creating the tech who do have empathy and compassion, and the end users who use these machines, how to help them. So to have the humans having empathy who create the machines, yes. The machines don't have any of these things, but then the end users do. So that's why we want to be careful to avoid these anthropomorphic terms.
I do believe it's possible to teach machines ethics, to embed the sorts of values that we want to have in our systems. But I'm actually against the idea that should we strive for empathy or compassion in machines. Those are human values, they're not machine values. Machines are not sentient, conscious, they don't have emotions. They can't actually ever be empathetic or compassionate. And that's one reason why we should never hand over high-stakes decisions that require human empathy, human compassion to machines. Those are decisions, human decisions, that should stay with humans.
Yes, it is, but we need to start with humans first. We need to ensure that teams and individuals that are building AI are fully aware of ways in which the technology they're building is going to be used. We need them to be trained up on AI ethics, the risks of AI, and responsible ways in which they need to go about building AI. But it doesn't stop there. We also need to ensure that users who are going to be interacting and adopting AI have a baseline level of literacy in how to interact and deal with such technology responsibly. So really across looking at every human interaction with AI, from build to deployment to training to usage, we need to ensure that there's a greater level of literacy and understanding of risks as well as AI ethics.
I believe this is a function of design. Systems that look at personalization data, for instance, or user preferences are considering a human context, right? The data is giving context for the human's behavior and preferences. That is going to be based on data, the rules, the objective function. And at AWS, our approach to responsible AI is people centered, keeping our customer and our customer's customer even in mind. And that's part of the culture and practice that I believe helps systems to have the human context that you're referencing.
No. Again, algorithms are not the humans. The human designers must take human context into account. And they must create algorithms that also take these into account. But again, I'm working really hard to not separate what are essentially mathematical formulas, beautiful mathematical formulas, and say that they are human.
Well, this is a fantastic question because it highlights that algorithms take into account the context that we give them. And therefore, if we're going to give them subtle decisions that require lots of context, then we better make sure that that's in the input. And that is again why various high-stakes decisions in the judiciary, we should be very reluctant to hand over to machines because it's very hard to provide all of that context.
Yes, but there are limitations. Context can be baked in through human and expert knowledge, baked into discrete tasks that AI is going to be performing, or into a series of tasks within a broader task that it's going to be performing. It can also be incorporated by ensuring that there's an element of human or expert in the loop compatibility to also account for non-automated contextual cues. For instance, in our own work in automated fact checking, we account for both. The search patterns and retrieval patterns of our expert analysts are baked into how our automated engines go about retrieving information, go about learning about discrete and new topical domains. And there's also ways in which where we have low levels of confidence in any automated inferences, we expose those instances to an expert in the loop workflow for greater human context.
Is a data set fair and balanced? It depends on the application context and its use case. A critical step in this process has to be defining what is fair at the very beginning or initial stages of design. And you're hearing me mention that because I believe that responsible AI needs to be something that is intentional and done in the initial stages of, or worked through and started, if you will, in the initial stages of a system or product design. When we talk about fair, that denotes eliminating or reducing, some degree of bias of the system results and similar performance or statistically insignificant variation in the results across different subgroups or populations, however that might be defined. So we recognize that biases can exist in various places, with data, but it's not data exclusively, excuse me. Biases can exist in how the data is labeled, the groups of the people that are annotating the data, in the algorithms, as well as in the way in which we're evaluating. So data sets have to reflect and accurately reflect the real world environment in which the model is being used. Attention needs to be given to make sure that that data is representative, right? Diverse, relevant, consistent, and comprehensive. And when folks are building machine learning models or AI models, it requires that there's good data in addition to leveraging things like benchmarking, model evaluation, human review and testing with different models, training and validation, and having a continuous improvement cycle to drive relevant and useful insights, but also make the necessary improvements that are critical to ensuring that we have fair and balanced results. An example, during design and development, customers want to be able to review the potential impact of a machine learning or AI system on its users or other stakeholders and third parties. And you have to consider testing that and evaluating that in real world or operational environments. And tools that we have that could be useful in that context are like Amazon SageMaker Clarify that detects and measures potential bias during data preparation, as well as model training. And in the deployed model, and if you couple that with something like Amazon SageMaker model monitoring, that can provide the inspection that's needed in production for that continual improvement that I was mentioning. Focusing solely on the data is not enough to ensure that there's fair or balanced use and implementation of these systems. So I go back to the need for responsible AI as an imperative, and it has to be this intentional, comprehensive approach to ensure that there is safe, secure, fair, and inclusive design, development, deployment, and ongoing use of AI and its underlying data.
At the outset of design, all technology and policy regarding technology must prioritize ecological flourishing and human well-being. This then means, as part of human well-being, the data sets that we use, we must recognize that inherently they tend to be biased, as we know from the work of people like Dr. Joy Bulamwini and Dr. Timothy Gibru. Focus on what they have to say.
This is a difficult problem. There are at least 21 different mathematical definitions of fairness. And so, to start, we have to decide what sort of fairness we're striving for. And then we have to be aware of the fact that the data we're collecting in the real world reflects the biases of that real world. If we're collecting data about who to hire for jobs, well, we've got lots of historical data, but that reflects the conscious, subconscious biases of the humans who were doing the hiring in the past. And therefore, we need to be very careful that we don't perpetuate those biases into the systems we have today. And to compound matters, these AI systems, at least at present, tend to be rather black box-like, and therefore we will be compiling those biases of the past into these black boxes of the future.
We first need to start with ensuring we have a good knowledge of where AI is going to be used. And then we need to ensure that the data sets used to train AI are representative of situations where AI is going to be deployed and used. Although that's not always going to be possible, we should endeavor to get as close to that as possible, especially a high coverage of risk-weighted edge cases where that could lead to harm, that could lead to potential abuse as well. Really, on that point of abuse, we also need to be conscious of areas such as disinformation. Right now, with advances in generative AI across text, images, and video, synthetic disinformation is a very real risk facing all of us. In fact, in a recent report that we released, 85% of cues that we shared with some of the leading frontier models were accepted and produced disinformation. But there is existing technology that would allow for those capabilities to be constrained by either constraining the data sets that they're trained on or by constraining the specific prompts that they respond to.